All right. A little bit late, but we made it. Hopefully you guys' week is off to, well, it's halfway over. If you guys believe it's Wednesday like I do, they all just bleed together when you're having fun, right? A lot of days just run together for me. Even weekends at this point, traveling and doing everything that we're doing. So I don't know if you guys feel the same way or not, but as you get older, like I remember being young and looking forward to the weekend and like doing fun stuff, and we still do sometimes. But I think as you get older, it all just kind of rolls together. There was actually a tweet the other day, it may have been earlier this morning. Actually, there was a psychologist. No, she was a CPA. She was a CPA, and she said, "Does anybody else feel like life just gets faster and faster? Any recommendations on ways to like slow time down?" And for me personally, when time is slower or perceived as slower anyway, because it's really about your perception. By the time you're late 20s, early 30s, a lot of your day just becomes monotonous. You're in the same environment consistently most of the time. You drive the same way to work. You do things with your children on a regular basis. You have a schedule, you have a routine. And when you've done that enough times, your brain and your subconscious actually puts that on autopilot. So it compresses time down in the way that you relate to it or perceive it so that, you can focus on other things. How many of you have like driven to work and then looked up and you're at work and you don't even remember the drive, right? So just things like that. If you can do things differently that are outside your normal routine. The example I gave, in my reply to her post was brush your teeth with your left hand. Things that pull you into the moment because you actually have to focus on whatever you're doing, and it can't just be a passive thing for you to do. Or travel, right? If you're experiencing a new place, new things, and you are away from your phone, I think phone has a big thing, a lot to do with it also. You have that in your hand. It's also something that's very consistent and consuming. So the more you can detach from that, which I know is difficult, believe me, I'm in the same boat. But the more you can do that, and the more that you can actually just pull yourself into whatever you're actually doing and focus on that, I think it actually helps to slow time down. And I remember people saying when I was younger, the time goes faster and faster as you get older. And I think it might also be like, I know this is really philosophical to start with, so we'll get to the fun stuff. But as a percentage of your life, 1 year becomes less and less and less over time. So I remember being little, and my son's, young now. And for him, he thinks about, becoming an adult, and he's like, oh, that's like more than half of my life away. Or I have to live a whole nother lifetime to get there. But for an adult, if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years old, a year is very small percentage of how long you've been alive. So I think that has something to do with it too. But I'd love to know if you guys have any recommendations, things that you do in order to be able to slow time down, or feel like it pulls you into the moment to actually like kind of truncate that a little bit. Any tips or tricks I'm sure other people would enjoy in the comments or in the questions. And on that, we'll get into the questions. I don't have any super chats. If there were some super chats, which I'm sure there were, we did not get them. So I apologize, because I'm sure I will get some blowback later on that we did not answer some questions. But on to the macro before we get into the questions, because I'm sure you guys want to know that. There's a lot of people that come in, check things out, and then kind of roll, which I can completely appreciate. There's, we do these for 2 hours at a time. So it's a long listen to if you're listening back later, the next day or after that. On the macro side, we are continuing to progress here. It looks like negotiations are off between the US and Iran, and that conflict is now escalating. Many people circling back to the underwater sea cables, saying that they are going to mess with those. I do anticipate that that's going to play a role at some point. I do not know when that will take place, but I do think that that's going to be one of the escalations that Iran does eventually make their way to. Aside from that, though, the U.S. continues to bomb Iran, taking out critical infrastructure, cutting off water supply, doing many things that are very impactful in their negotiations. I do think that they'll come to resolution at some point, but I don't think it'll be until after the reverse carry trade does unwind. We've got the 10-year hanging around 2.7 over there in Japan on their bonds. Haven't really seen the spike that we're looking for. Again, closer to 3 is where the debt service becomes unsustainable for them. The yen versus the USD is over 160. It's not climbing rapidly, though. It's kind of inching its way up. We're at 160.5. We need a sharp move to the upside, 161, 162, which I've been saying the whole time, 160, 161, 162 is kind of going to be the cutoff for them. They are going to have to intervene. They do have a monetary meeting on Monday this next week. And the main gentleman that does their monetary policy is now sick or ill, and he will be unable to attend that meeting, which is interesting to me. Very good timing if they were going to do something outside of the scope of what he has talked about, which was a 25 basis point move. I do think that the market is priced in a 25 basis point move. If they do something outside of that, or they're more aggressive on the raise, if they move to 1.5, I think that could do it. We also have inflation here in the U.S. ticking up. Trump saying that's a good thing. I don't know if that's a good thing. The Fed's mandate, maybe it's a good thing for the transition that they're trying to, move along here. But we will need to lower interest rates now that Warsh is in. I do think that is on the horizon here imminently as well. At this monetary meeting for the U.S., the FOMC, I think we're going to see Japan move drastically up, and we are going to have to pivot down. That leaves, not a whole lot of wiggle room here. We do have the SpaceX IPO on Friday this week. If you wanted to time an IPO at the top of the market, you need euphoria, okay? Like when everybody thinks that it's going up for forever and the shoe shine boys telling you to buy in, which is exactly what's going on with SpaceX stock right now. The IPO is 4 times oversubscribed, $1.77 trillion IPO, the largest IPO that's ever happened in the history of any of the exchanges, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, etc. This is the largest one that's ever taken place by a good order of magnitude. I will not be buying. I can't tell you what to do, and this is a good time for my disclaimer. Nothing here is financial advice. It's only for entertainment and educational purposes. You should always speak with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. The opinions shared here are my opinions and what I'm doing, not the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or any of its subsidiaries. So on that, we will not be participating in the IPO. I anticipate, and people aren't going to like this, I think it's going to move down substantially off of the IPO price. I'm sure that there's a lockup period for the shares. That's pretty traditional in IPOs. I don't know what Elon's lockup period is going to be for these shares, but I do think that here's another one. The time when he went on SNL and talked about Doge, guess when that was? That was the top of the market in 2021. So if, Elon's launching something or some big events happening around Elon, maybe that's a cue that we're at the top of the market. We'll just have to see how things play out. I would love to be wrong. I would love for it to go to the moon and everybody make a bunch of money and me miss out on it. But I think that there is going to be pretty substantial move to the downside in markets across the board when the reverse carry trade unwinds. And if we see, trouble in the bond market over the weekend on Sunday night, I've always kind of anticipated that was going to be the case. We saw that in August of 2024 with them, having their monetary meeting on their Monday, 15th and 16th this next week. I anticipate that could be the case again. This person says Elon's lockup is 366 days. So it's a year and a day, 12 months and a day that they are requiring those that are early investors to maintain exposure to their stock. Makes sense. You don't want a ton of people dumping right off the jump there. With a direct listing or a SPAC or some of the other things that you can do, There is no, well, not always a lockup period. Sometimes there is a lockup period. So that's how that's going to be. And again, timing things, if Elon's coming out with that, I do think that that's a strong signal that we may be seeing a market top on the day that does IPO. Again, completely my opinion. Don't make bets off of it. Just my best guess. And I'm telling you guys what I'm doing. Trying to think if there's anything else in the macro that's pertinent to the conversation before we get into the questions. Haven't seen anything huge coming out. Huge. Had some really interesting conversations. So I did speak earlier this week after the live Monday night. I spoke at the DACFP conference that's here in Dallas. It's for financial advisors and educating them on crypto. They are continuing education platform and credits for advisors. Those that attended the conference got some continuing education credits, and then they also provide a course that advisors can take that teaches them about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some DeFi. I was interviewed by the head of ETF research, Eric, over there at Bloomberg, along with the other panelists. Really enjoyed that. Shout out to Eric. He was also the guy that reported from Bloomberg that the XRP ETF was fake. So I got to meet him in person, which was cool. And got to meet some other very interesting people there at that conference. Institutional players. I can tell you that many other wealth managers, almost all of them really, are looking at how they can help their clients with crypto, get educated around it, understand the risk associated, mitigate the risk associated. We do provide sub-advisory through digital or DAG Wealth to other RIAs. So if your investment advisor wants to help you with crypto, you like them, they've done a good job for you, we're not trying to take any business, we would love an introduction. And then we can work with them to be able to offer crypto inside your portfolio management with that advisor. So don't hesitate to reach out over there at digitalwealthpartners.net, the contact us form, and you can just fill that out and let us know if you have some introductions. Also, I don't know if y'all saw Mikkel's video or not, but I'll touch on it before we get into the questions. I guess he ran into ARK Invest's analyst that was there. You guys know Kathy Wood. She also spoke via video conference at the conference. I guess she's in Japan, which is interesting. You know, it was like 6 a.m. her time, 4 p.m. Our time here, Central Time in Texas. And the analyst that was there, that was at the booth, I guess him and Connor got to talking. And if you want to go watch the whole rewind of the conversation that he had, this other individual, I guess, is a Bitcoin maxi, and he just kind of explained, you know, he kind of tried to poke some holes in Connor's theory around XRP, which is fair, right? Like we always, we're open to new data. That's the other thing I love about Connor is, you know, anytime we're talking to somebody new, we ask good questions, and if they're able to provide good data around that, it might change our opinion. But this gentleman did not provide overwhelmingly good data. So if you want to go check that out, it was interesting. All right, go ahead and jump into the questions. Again, appreciate y'all taking time out of your Wednesday night to come hang out with me. Please like, subscribe, share, and thank you so much to everybody that contributed to the subscriptions on the YouTube. We are over 200,000 followers over here on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, X, and then also here over here on TikTok. So just want to say thank you. Feel super blessed and grateful to have so many fantastic people take the time out of their week to listen to my content. I never would have thought that I'd be in a position where people cared this much and like made this a regular thing in their life where they listen to this. So thank you if you do that. It is very much appreciated. We appreciate the support. We're excited to be in a position to help you guys. So first up, we got Colin. He says, hey, Jake, can you please record your 10K plus webinar this Friday? I won't be able to join. Appreciate you bringing that up. So this Friday, we are putting on a webinar for anybody that has an allocation of at least 10,000 XRP in crypto, going over all the things that you need to be thinking about. So a lot of people say, what should I be doing? What steps should I be taking? How can I be proactive? We're going to get into all of that around estate planning, how to mitigate taxes, things that you need to be thinking about on insurance, and really at what point that makes sense to start doing those things. I've told you guys many times, unless you've got $50,000 to $80,000 in your crypto portfolio, probably don't need an LLC right off the rip. And the only reason I say that number is I think that we're going to move pretty quickly to the upside when we do see price appreciation. Most people, if you talk to an estate planner or somebody else, they're going to be pretty conservative. They're going to be like, all right, I don't know that you even need this until you have $500,000 in crypto. But many of them don't understand the pace at which crypto moves and what this is going to look like when utility actually happens and they drive, XRP's prices substantially higher. In my opinion, you can go watch the domino theory on how that's actually going to take place. And so, for me, if you had, call it 50,000 XRP and XRP went straight to $100 or $1,000, you have a substantial amount of wealth in a very short period of time. On the low end of that, you got 5 million. On the high end of that, you got 50 million. 50 million is over the $30 million gift tax threshold, which we will talk about in the webinar on Friday. And we'll run through, all the considerations around that. So again, depending on what you think is going to happen and how fast it's going to transpire would determine, what steps you might take now in order to be proactive. And again, we'll walk you through all that. That will be recorded. Anybody that subscribes and says they want to attend the webinar, whether they are there or not, will receive the recording on that. We will have it for the mastermind group as well. So check it out. I think we're already at capacity on that. I think we can have up to 1,000 people on the webinar. And I think we already have like 1,300 or 1,400 people registered for that. So if you aren't able to get in, if it's oversubscribed, you will receive the recording. We'll do about 30 minutes worth of information. And then the last 30 minutes we'll be taking questions from everybody that is in attendance to be able to break that down even further and make it clearer for everybody. So excited for that. Thank you guys for taking time out of your Friday or your weekend to watch the playback. And hopefully, I think it'll be really valuable for people. Weird Kids TV, they say, read a couple articles stating Japan plans to only raise 25 basis points, which won't cause reverse carry trade to unwind. So since theory is out the door, is tokenization of the DTCC's assets, will that be the next catalyst for price appreciation in July? Pat, we haven't even got to the monetary meeting yet. I don't know why everybody just immediately jumps to the conclusion. Like, I don't know. I appreciate people being conservative. And I would agree that 25 basis points is already priced into the market because that is what everybody anticipates. I'm confident that we're like, why would the gentleman, well, maybe he really is sick. And again, prayers to him and his family. I really hope that he is okay and that he is not ill for very long and he's able to make it through whatever he's dealing with. There in Japan, the gentleman that works for the BOJ that is going to be out on Monday, Tuesday when they make that announcement, whatever it's going to be. I think with where things are at and the timing of everything, it's time. In order for XRP to be used at scale, it needs to be a significantly higher price. The only way it's going to get there is through a supply shock. It's not going to be a utility-driven deal. Once it's high enough, they can start using it because it will be the cheapest, fastest way to be able to settle payments and transactions on chain on the XRPL. Until it's there, it's really not capable of the volume of transactions that it would need to be in order to be able to facilitate that. Many people have already pointed that out. They say, even if it could be used a bunch, it's got to be a lower price, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that as much as people think is available on the market in order to be able to facilitate transactions. And so for that reason, I think that there needs to be another orchestrated supply shock similar to what we saw in 2017, 2018. I think that demand will be exacerbated by the reverse carry trade unwinding, Japan needing it for their economy, and then the rest of the world kind of stepping in behind them to push the price to where it'll save them. Because if they don't, we're all screwed too. There's just too much leverage built into the system. So for July 28th, we have the pilot for the DTCC real-time settlement is happening. And that's going to be T0. And I think they need a significantly higher price XRP for that. Then also Swift is going live on the 28th of this month for their real-time transfer. It's interesting that they would both be on the same day like that. So, you know, head on a swivel. We'll see. Could they kick the can? Sure. But like I said last time, you know, 2 days ago, I said 20 days. We would now be at 18 days until that takes place. And I think that XRP has to be a significantly higher price in order for them to use it by that point. And I do think that the reverse carry trade will be the catalyst, the beginning of the catalyst. We got 3 lines. He says, Stronghold, fun fact, 4-part series, not a governance token, transfers value similar to XRP. XLM Stronghold is Notch preferred partner with 80 trillion in ACH network. Yeah, they do move value inside their own ecosystem with their token. It is a rewards-based token, and it does have some governance components to it. Maybe we're just not a big enough player for them to deal with. I reached out to them multiple times to try to use their platform. Never heard anything back. So maybe they don't care. Maybe they're on the institutional side. Maybe they're already rolled in and they don't need our demand. But it would have been cool to be able to like use that and be an advocate for it. So maybe I'm salty. I don't know. And that's probably fair to say. Unless Stripe makes the acquisition, I mean, Stripe processes 3% of total global merchant payments. I don't see them coming anywhere close to that. Stripe's already developing their own infrastructure and their stablecoin and things to be able to facilitate that themselves. So unless somebody else big like WorldPay were to acquire Stronghold and make that the core piece of their infrastructure, WorldPay also backs Stripe, just so you guys know. That's the real underlying technology that's used for payments and what facilitates the merchant services that they provide. They're great. I like the idea. I think that there's value there. My only concern is similar, and this is probably, you know, it's a similar concern to what a lot of people have around XRP. They're like, well, why wouldn't somebody else just build it themselves and dwarf them because they already have the distribution and volume? I think that's likely. Not to say that they won't be around, but yeah, I mean, it's a smart contract component built on top of XLM. So I mean, at the end of the day, like that money is also going to flow through XLM on the back end as well. So yeah, not to say there's not market opportunity there. I made a video on it. I do think that there's price appreciation and potential in that token. I just don't think it's as much as a lot of people believe there is. He also says co-founder Sean Bennett wrote the code for stablecoin XRP XLM, and Stronghold co-founder, former head of growth at Seller, Tammy Camp, on August 23rd, 2021, stated that Ripple was an investor. Ripple is an investor. Ripple's invested in a lot of different things. They just invested in T54. They've invested in Propto. They also invested in Fortress. If you guys remember that one, that was a Nevada trust bank that ended up going under. They put an LOI in order to acquire them and did deeper due diligence and ended up backing out of the deal. And they ended up going under. So just because somebody's invested in something doesn't mean it's the next best thing since sliced bread. Do they have some control there? Do they have a board seat to help direct and guide things? I'd want to know that. Sometimes that's what VCs or investors will do. How involved is Ripple in fostering that ecosystem and providing some distribution for that network? There's a lot of different types of capital, right? You want to be pretty strategic about who you take money from. Ideally, you know, some people just need the money when they're getting started. But you know, Ripple has been a pretty good investor. The majority of the things that they've invested in have gone on to do well. And if you look at people like the Waltons, so I don't know if you guys, I mean, surely you know who Walmart is, right? The Waltons will invest in technology that they plan on either acquiring or using inside of their network of companies. And let's say it's a SaaS platform and they were like, okay, this is the one that we like. We're going to invest in the company. Maybe we're going to buy a piece of it, or we're going to acquire the whole thing. And then we're going to juice it. We're going to make sure that everybody in our ecosystem has to use this deal. So if that's Ripple's plan with that, I can get behind that. But Ripple's focus is also enterprise payments, not necessarily peer-to-peer or merchant services. Now, it does sound like, based on what David Schwartz was talking about at XRP Vegas this year, that is their plan to move downstream over the next 3 to 4 years. So maybe it's a long play with Stronghold. They've made the investment there, and they do plan to make an acquisition or take a stronger position in that company and help them get the distribution that they're looking for. So again, for me, I just bet on sure bets. Personally, the only thing that I have the highest conviction on, I'll say it that way, is XRP being adopted. He's put another one here. I appreciate all the super chats and the great information. He says, World Bank PDF 2021 blockchain interoperability named Stronghold on page 23. Stronghold market cap September 2022, 2 million, because became SOC 2 certified 2 years before Circle or Binance, first client of IBM. That's another great point. Again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the software or that it won't be used or that it's not a good play. I just don't, for me, the ROI is greater personally, I think, on XRP than really anything else. I think that there's a lot of great opportunities out there in the market. And it will be a multi-chain future. There will be multiple chains that have significant adoption and utility. And for, niche applications, I don't want to say it's a small application. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market cap. But it's not quadrillions of dollars like the derivatives market. Okay, so this is actually a really good framework for people that I'm going to mention here. It's helped me. I'll say it that way. You can apply it however you want. So when looking at different opportunities, I will literally write down the market cap, the total addressable market that they are trying to capture. And I'll also write down what I think is realistic for them to be able to capture of that market cap. Same thing in our companies. Depending on how we want to allocate resources, what we want to develop next, we're looking through cost to benefit all the time. And total market cap is a way that I frame things. So if there is a market cap that is literally 10, 100, 1,000 times larger than another opportunity that we have, the same amount of effort to be able to garner 1% of either one of those total addressable markets, it's going to take the same amount of work and resources and time and all that stuff. So why wouldn't you go after the 1,000x opportunity over the one that's the smaller one? So again, this is just my framework. You don't have to adopt it. It's the way that I think about things. It's the way that I've talked with many billionaires and a lot of people that have been very successful, and they tend to operate in a similar capacity. People talk about dreaming big, right? Whether you run a small shop inside of a small town, or you're looking to license that model and go international, it's a lot of the same stress and work. So why wouldn't you go after the bigger market opportunity? And I take that same logic over to investing. So I would look at total market cap of merchant services. I would look at total market cap of back-end settlement of stock markets and derivatives. And then depending on which one of those was larger and how much of those market caps I thought different networks were going to be able to garner, I would place my chips according to that. So again, not financial advice, just a framework that I use. So he does have one more here, and he shouts out Smoke, which again, Smoke does fantastic research. He says they have a reputation of, I'm assuming he meant secrecy, and have made requests to banker Stronghold, Smoke Stronghold World, Smoke Dog of Stronghold World to remove X post. A few years ago, it glitched to $21. grain of salt here. Hey, look, like I said, there's definitely upside in a lot of these networks. Okay. I'm just here for what I think is going to be the highest ROI. And it's not to say that you shouldn't be diversified, right? If you believe in, if you don't have 100% conviction that certain things are going to play out, like I didn't in 2020 and 2021. I didn't know which networks were going to be, I just didn't know enough. And so I had 13 positions. Some of those, a few of them didn't do very well, and the rest of them did great just because of the market action that took place. It wasn't anything that I did or didn't do or utility. It was just speculation in the market. These that decouple from Bitcoin are going to be utility driven. And they need to be certain prices in order to be able to be used at scale to be able to deliver the value that whatever network is supporting or the use case that the network's supposed to be supporting. So at a $21 Stronghold, what's Stronghold's current price here? I bet it's still, is it under a penny? Is it still a penny? SHX price. Yeah, currently trading at 0.04 of a penny. So at $21, I do have a calculator here. We're going to do a little bit of math. Calculator. So we're going to divide 21 divided by 0.0045 because that's what it's currently at. That is a 4,666.6666. So that's we're going to move the decimal twice. Maybe like a 46,000% move if it did move to those levels. I think it could get there over the long term. I do. But I also think that that's potentially kind of the high end of what it needs to be in order to be able to facilitate value transfer in that ecosystem with the level of adoption that I think they're going to be able to garner. Again, if WorldPay makes the acquisition and they make that the underlying deal, that completely changes everything about that. It would be significantly greater value than that over time. Could be a $100 token over time. But when I did the math before, if it was able to just garner 1% of the merchant services market, so not 3 like Stripe, because Stripe is the biggest that's currently out there. Aside, again, they're backed by WorldPay, who has the majority of the market. It was like $1, which is still very substantial move from where it's currently at. So again, appreciate the education on it. I think it's a good opportunity, but for me, like I said before, there's different types of reasons that you might invest in things. So price appreciation is definitely one of those, right? Number go up, that's good. There's also things that may end up being premium collateral that you'll get preferred rates against, or higher LTV, or will provide you access to certain ecosystems that you wouldn't have access to if you did not have that asset or that relationship, right? Relationship capital is a big, big deal, especially for family offices. You see a lot of philanthropic stuff done. Yeah, there's tax benefits to that, but oftentimes it's perception in the market, and then also strategic capital with different people that you're donating to their foundation or different things. And look, you can hate the world the way that it works, but it is a good old boys game. Just being completely real with you guys. People talk about your network is your net worth. That is not a lie. The rooms that you're in, the people that you know, the calls that you can make a difference. Especially if you fall on hard times, if things go bad for you and you make some poor choices or the market shifts and things don't go the way that you intended. If you have proximity to other people that can help pick you up, and that you've helped in the past or provided value to, and there's some reciprocity there, or strategic benefit outside of that. You don't always have to like the people that you deal with. There's additional benefits there just beyond the potential return on investment. And as you guys progress and we do see price appreciation here, you'll start to deal in that capacity with people. You'll have the money, right? So over 50 million, $100 million, like, you're good. You've made your money. You've got rich. You can park that somewhere and live off a very nice life off of just the interest. At that point, it becomes, how do I gain fulfillment? What value do I have to provide to society? What network and connection can I create in order to be able to accomplish those things? And capital is a way, it's the lowest exchange of value, but it does create a relationship, right? So, probably preaching to the choir here. You guys know a lot of this stuff, but as things progress, I think that that's relevant. Running it down with the super chats tonight. He says, on another note, the government talking about flying saucers tells me this is the final distraction before they flip the switch. I don't know, tinfoil hat for a moment. I don't know if you guys saw that stone that was tweeted by Elon or somebody close to him. Maybe it was his ex-wife years ago. But there was like the vaccine, and then there was some rocks and stuff, and then there was some aliens. I don't remember the exact emojis that were on the rock, but aliens were on the rock. So here we are in 2026. They're releasing a lot of those files and things. So maybe you're right. Maybe that is a tell. Again, like I said earlier, I think Elon and the IPO for SpaceX is kind of a tell. Rick Johnson, my man, he says a story told by Confucius. The day that Roy Man JC was born, the doctor told his mom, your son has 3 legs and only 2 feet. That was the offset, the main side effect of the roid abuse later in life. Comes up with some wild stories. Appreciate the super chat, man. I'm gonna stay away from the next super chat there. Yeah. Sailor's in an interesting spot. He thinks that money's rotating out of Bitcoin, gold, and the other stock market in order to be able to be pushed into Anthropic and AI companies. I could kind of see that. They are raising tons and tons of capital, billions and billions of dollars. The amount of money that's sloshing around in private markets right now is wild. And I've talked about this before, but it's an interesting statistic. So, and I didn't learn this until I went to the Texas Stock Exchange, and when they were putting that on, we hosted with Goldman and a few other people here in Dallas. They were talking about the ETFs. And in talking about the ETFs, they talked about the stock market in the 1980s. And there were 8,000 publicly listed companies in the 1980s. Today, there are only 4,000 publicly listed companies. And there's another 4,000 ETFs. So the number of, options to buy on the stock market is very similar. But, your exposure to these companies is significantly less. And part of the reasoning for that is there's so much money in private markets. Used to, the only way that you could really get $100 million worth of investment into your corporation was by going public. Now that's not the case. You can raise $100 million, I don't want to say pretty easily, but far more easily than you used to be able to, because there's just a lot more capital out there. There's so much money sloshing around from M2 money supply being increased as much as it has been. There's a lot more liquidity. And people are willing to take those risks here in the US, which is very different than other capital markets globally. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Canada. Highly recommend if you haven't ever been to Canada. We went to Collision. It was probably 2 years ago that we attended Collision. Yeah, it was, because it was right before my hair transplant. And so while we were there, it was 40,000 people at that conference. And we talked to so many early stage companies that were like begging for capital there in Canada. And people are just super conservative in Canada. They invest in real estate, they invest in raw minerals, in the stock market. They are very conservative in comparison to those here in the US that are willing to take a role on an early stage company. And I think that's why you've seen such innovative companies be able to grow substantially here in the US versus other parts of the world is, one, capital is significantly more available, but two, our private markets are much more liquid. and people are willing to deploy capital into these companies early, whereas the rest of the world is very hesitant still to do so. All right, we got Money Matters Greatly. They say, doesn't it sound strange that the OCC has until the 18th to provide stablecoin rules, but the DTCC is starting to tokenize on the 13th? Unrelated? Thanks for all that you do. So it's full implement. Well, it's kind of a three-phased approach from my understanding. So the 28th of this month should be go live for real-time settlement for T+0. And then they will begin tokenizing a portion of the stock market, the early stage of that. I think it's primarily going to be ETFs on July 13th, which is the 3-year anniversary for XRP and its settlement clarity. Well, it wasn't settlement. It was the clarity that the judge gave it in 2023 as not a security. And then, later in October this year, it's full bore tokenization after the beta runs for Q3. So again, wasn't me that said this. This was the president of NASDAQ. When she was talking to Monica Long last year at Swell, she said that the first place they're going to be implementing distributed ledger technology is going to be for the back-end settlement and reconciliation of trades with the DTCC for the stock market before they start tokenizing stocks. So take that as you will. Again, I think by the 28th of this month, if that's when they're really going to start settling real time, you're going to need a substantially higher price. And the OCC, again, I do think is probably going to come out sooner than later on stablecoin guidance in order to be able to stabilize the bond market when that inevitably implodes because of the reverse carry trade. Money Matters Greatly again. They say, is Swift supposed to begin instant settlement June 28th, or you believe they will need instant settlement by then for what they roll out? They should be moving to instant settlement on that date. But like I've told you guys before, I think you need a high price for XRP before they can start doing that. If there's not enough liquidity in the token, that's not going to push the price to where it needs to be. There needs to be a huge influx of liquidity into the token or a supply and demand shift that causes a supply shock on the exchanges to drive the price to where it needs to be. Once they start using it, you will then have a price floor for transactions that are happening over the network. And I think that'll continue to compound over time as more and more things are tokenized and more volume moves on chain. Still waiting on Evernorth. We haven't talked about that in a little bit, but they have filed, I think, everything that they need in order to be able to finalize their SPAC. That's been a long time coming. I think they announced that had been Q3 last year that they announced that. So we're almost a year later here that they haven't been able to finalize their SPAC. Again, timing, I think, matters on that. We still need a BlackRock ETF as well. Roy, he says, when you say 3-digit XRP, are you talking mainly $100 to $200 or high 3 digits like 450 and up? PS, UNT later the best, God bless. It really just depends on the use case for where they need it to be. I think it probably needs to be at least 100 in order for them to start using it in the capacity to settle the back end of the stock market and Swift. Does it compound very quickly after that? Potentially, right? But I think that's the minimum value that would provide enough liquidity with what's available on the market to settle things for them to start using it. So I still think that you could see significantly higher prices this year. I still have the bet with Scams on 750. I think I'm going to get him this year. If he's watching this, just, get ready to pay up at the end of the year, double or nothing. But again, we'll get all those people paid back that he's taking XRP from. That's my main objective with that bet. It's not to make any money. I may end up just donating the extra stuff that I have to charity. So I just want people that he's taking XRP from to get it back, because not everybody has the amount of XRP to lose. All right. Money Matters again. He says, also, I thought the only news on the DTCC was July 13th, but you've mentioned a few times that Swift and DTCC on June 28th. Maybe you have dates confused. Again, July 18th is actual tokenization of some of the exchanges. The 28th of this month should move to T+0 for real-time settlement. We got Bush Wookie. It's an interesting name. They say just here to say, here you say Bush Wookie online. Thank you for all that you do for us. This is great. That's a great name. All right, this gentleman, again, appreciate you. He's here every week. He asks great questions. He says, legend. I appreciate you, dude. You say that the reverse carry trade would be on a Sunday. There's only Sunday the 21st. Reverse carry trade would last 3 days. And then the 24th and 25th, XRP would rise, ready for the 628. If the BOJ raises 1.5, the 16th, would that happen? Then on June 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th. Again, I don't know dates here. I'm just telling you what I think is going to play out based on the circumstances and the constraints that exist out there in the market. I do think that the Bank of Japan, they could raise a quarter come Monday. And maybe that doesn't break the camel's back. It's not the straw that breaks the camel's back. Maybe we're waiting on Iran to cut the underwater sea cables and there's going to be a blackout, or there's going to be, we need oil to spike again. It's been kind of hovering in the same area, priced in yen, hanging out between 14 and 15,000, consolidating. Normally when a chart, winds up like that, it's before a big move. How long is it going to wind up and trend sideways and be pretty stable? Your guess is as good as mine. To pick out specific days this month, your guess is as good as mine. I gave you a time frame for when I think it's going to take place. I think it could take place anytime in that, the next 18 days. If they're going to use it in that capacity and they don't kick the can, right? Like, again, I have no control over what the governments do when they implement these things. There's been lots of deadlines that have been pushed out. I don't have any say-so in any of that. I'm just some crazy guy on the internet. Like I told a gentleman earlier today, my two pronouns that I prefer are lunatic and delusional. So if you're going to insult me, please use those pronouns or adjectives, whatever you want to use them as. Rick Johnson again, he says, when parents get old, their own ingrate kids may put them into a dungeon rat hole home. It happens a lot. I see it lots and it's terrible. How do people structure to avoid this when you're old and feeble? There's insurance that you can get that will help you pay for assisted living. Assisted living is very expensive. It is not cheap. Sometimes you can't take care of your parents too. Sometimes they don't want you to. Now, they did take care of you when you're a kid, and you do have some responsibility, and it's weird how roles turn like that when you get older. I told you guys before, but I kind of felt like I was parenting my dad, about 5 weeks before he passed away. And just a weird dynamic when somebody's been your authority your entire life and you care so much about like what they think of you, and then you have to help them because they can't help themselves. A hard spot to be. So I would say get wealthy enough that you can afford help would be one way to do it. And then the second way to do it would be through insurance. If you become disabled or have that inability and you do have a life policy or some other type of insurance or a rider on that allows for you to get help in that situation, the burden wouldn't be on your children. And you wouldn't feel the neglect or animosity from them not being able to provide that solution or willing to take you into their home. Nobody's coming to save you. And that's kind of what I learned when my dad died. Like, I'm the backstop. There is nobody else. I'm completely responsible for myself, my actions, the outcomes in my life. And I don't expect my son or my children to pick up the slack on that. I think a lot of cultures do, though. So again, that really just depends on how you're raised. I do feel some, if my dad had gotten old and feeble, I would have done some things to help him out if I was in a position to do so. I will be for my mom when she's, up there in age. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. I don't think there's any, everybody's going to have their opinion on what's the right and wrong way to do that, but it's not fun. Like anytime your parent is disabled and incapable of providing for themselves, and then they're mad too, right? Like that was kind of where my dad was. He was just angry because he was in a position where he did want to provide for himself, but was too hurt to do so. Gabriel, I say, after price appreciation, would Ripple stop issuing 1 billion tokens a month? They don't issue 1 billion tokens a month, but I'll go over that in a second. Into the open market to ensure XRP's price stability. Is that true that 94% of XRP is owned by retail? No. Okay. So there's a cryptographically time-locked escrow that Ripple has. They have over 55 wallets, I think, that are involved with that escrow. There's probably more than that as more and more get released. A new wallet becomes active that gets a new distribution of some of that billion. They normally split it between 2 wallets at this point because they've been doing the escrow for so long that they re-escrow on the end every time. About 700 million is what they currently re-escrow on the end, and they do not put onto the market. So it's really only about 300 million that come onto the market. They have reduced that amount over time as XRP's price has gone up. You can actually watch based on how much they've transacted and what they've re-escrowed over time. They've actually reduced the amount that they've sold off onto the market. So I anticipate that as we see price appreciation happen, there will be another reduction in the amount of XRP that they sell onto the open market. Again, with the Clarity Act, and if that gets passed, they would be required to hold no more than 20% of the total token supply. Like I've talked about before, there's a couple of different ways that they could accomplish that. They could vote to burn the escrow that they have. They can't do that themselves. They only control 3 of the UNL validators. There's 35 of them. They would have to convince at least 80% of those validators to vote in that direction if they intended to do that. And it would be a decision made by the validators on the network. That could be a supply shock type situation. When they escrowed the 50 billion the first time is when we saw the last price move. We also saw something similar when XLM burnt half of their supply because they had 100 billion and then they reduced it to 50 billion. So could that take place? Sure. David Schwartz has talked about that, and that's why I know they couldn't just autonomously do that. They would have to put it to a vote from the UNL validators. But they do not release $1 billion onto the market every month. That's what's released out of the escrow. They re-escrow a significant portion of that. This year, and really kind of almost the majority of last year, they sold 300 million per month onto the market. Like I said, I do think that will be reduced, but I do think that is a mechanism. It's a treasury mechanism in order to be able to supply the market with enough to meet the demand that's coming on to be able to stabilize the price, just like you mentioned. I think you need something like that. I think that that's a really strategic way that they've structured this in order to be able to help maintain price stability over extended periods of time so that they could trial the network at lower prices. Because at a high price, it's going to be fairly stable anyway. It's going to take billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, to move the market percentage points in either direction. And then to the retail point, retail just, I'll tell you all a story. This is years ago. So this is 2024. I'm having whiskey with Simon from Uphold. And he asked me, we talked for a while. We were there having whiskey for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours. And again, shout out to Trey for putting that event on. It was the XDC event in Austin. He was nice enough to have me there along with some other people, and I sponsored and spoke. He runs on XDC and on XRP, those websites, if you guys want to go check those out. Anyway, so they're having drinks, and he asked me how much of the XRP supply I thought retail held. And I'm like, in my head, I thought, well, you know the answer to this. Like, why are you asking me what I think, right? Like, you guys are basically the only place you can buy it, until the lawsuit was over. So you're going to have a much better idea of this than me. This was August of, maybe it was August of 23. Maybe it's just 3 years ago. And, I told him, I think, maybe 5 or 6% of the total supply is held by retail. And that, again, was 3 years ago. So it's been a while since then. Obviously, that's changed. There's much more XRP in the open market now than there was back then. And, because of the lawsuit and, the clarity and everything else that we have, XRP is obviously, the number of wallets that are on the XRPL are substantially higher than what it was. But he said, yeah, I think that's about right. So I don't know what the percentage increase has been over the past 3 years. I'm going to say just across the exchanges that I'm aware of and the cold wallets that are out there that are not exchanges, maybe 12, 13%. So between 12 and 13 billion is held by retail. The rest of it is still either held by the exchanges themselves for their own treasury, other large enterprises or bodies, Ripple, and other people in the ecosystem. So it's still not that much, maybe somewhere between 10 and 15% of the supply, I think is held by retail. And that's including what's on exchanges and openly listed wallets. If you have more than 10,000 XRP, you're in the top 4% of wallets, right? So that doesn't mean you're in the top 4% of holders. That just means you're in the top 4% of wallets. And that's the closest proxy that you can get. If you guys want to go check out those statistics, again, shout out, mentioned it before, but Francis Bovine runs that website with the analytics from the XRPL and updates that and keeps it for us. So wake up, Uncle Danny. Shout out to him for doing that. But you can go check those statistics out over there at rich-list.info is the website where you can look at those things. So again, that's my educated guess. Somewhere between 10 and 15% of the total supply is held by retail, and dispelling some of those myths around how much is released onto the market each month. Chomp, Mr. Master. He says, Jake the Snake, chomp, chomp. Mastermind member here, but nervous to hit the Discord. Scammers got me guarding my pockets. Any tips on joining safely? And when does crypto wake up? Big event or steady build? I do think it's going to be a big event on the crypto side. Again, appreciate you being part of the mastermind. If you want to join the mastermind, we would love to see you in there. Over 17,000 people continue to participate there in the mastermind. All you got to do is go to beyondbroke.com and use the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, the number 1. And then MO, like Mary Oscar, gets you the first month for $2 in social or Carbon One. You check it out. But this is actually a really good question because we do have some malicious actors out there that will target people that are part of our group. And the way that you can do that is you can turn off communications. There's some settings inside the Discord. You actually receive a video when you join the mastermind that tells you what settings you need to set in the Discord before you join, so that you're not going to be able to receive messages from people outside of our community. So if you'll go in there and change your settings based on the video that you received via email when you signed up, you should be good. You shouldn't be receiving any messages from anybody that's not inside of our mastermind. All right. They say, hey, Jake, sorry, we're going to put you on the spot tonight. Do you, Jake Claver, DWP or DAG, have an NDA with either BlackRock or Ripple? Be specific. I'm not going to say which one we have an NDA with. And just so you guys know, NDAs don't necessarily pertain to what you think they do. oftentimes they will pertain to specific projects that you're, looking at working on together, but most people will sign an NDA before they even begin talking, right? Before there's an LOI, before there's anything, so that you can share information openly with the other counterparty so that you can make informed decisions, whether you even want to work with them or not, right? So NDAs aren't always indicative that people are working together, but they are kind of a precursor for something larger. What I will say is we do have an NDA with one of those counterparties. So that's as much as you're going to get. Lucifer's stepkid. Oh, wow. Oh. They say, I'm going to go to Japan myself and start the reverse carry trade because this is some BS. Strait of Hormuz is blocked. You need... If you could, and again, not saying that anybody should perform any terroristic acts toward any country, if there were another catalyst that kept more oil from getting to Japan in some way, not going to name anything specific, that would cause things to accelerate over there. But I think they're already in a spot where they're going to have to. Again, the yen versus the USD is over 160, slowly climbing up to the point where they batted it down last time. If we crest 161, and it's a prominent move when it's doing that, they're going to have to step in here. So I don't think you're going to have to wait a whole lot longer. And it's horrible. It's not a good thing for the reverse carry trade to happen, by the way. Like, it is going to decimate markets. People are going to lose a lot of money. It's not going to be fun for most people. So I'm not excited that that's going to take place. We've positioned ourselves, myself, and our clients in a way that they think we think that they're going to be able to take advantage of that macro environment when it takes place. All right, I've gone all the way to the bottom. I'm going to work my way back up on the super chats. Again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your Wednesday to come hang out with me. Please like, subscribe, share. And again, thank you to everybody for getting us to 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. I never would have thought. You have aspirations for things, but to see it manifest and come to life is just surreal. So thank you guys. Brandon, he says, thoughts on XRP AI starter kit announced today, and try to get people into this. I show the DTCC 4.7 quadrillion tokenized to the partners, etc. I get eye rolls at this point. If you don't get it, you never will. Look, a lot of the stuff that's happening right now sounds really futuristic, almost sci-fi. Space travel, commercialization of space, building, a sustainable society on the moon and then Mars, real-time payments and agentic, software, working on your behalf and you not having to do all the menial tasks that you're used to doing all the time. Like 6 months ago, I'd have been like, I don't know how close we are. And we have come so far in the last 6 months in AI's ability to generate photos, videos, create code, build agents that are literally autonomous, that can go do whatever you give them as a task on a repetitive basis, and even give themselves the next steps in the project management and execute. And you can build it where you say, hey, run, you go do it, and then I'll come back and check on you later. Or you can have it, check every single time and ask you if you want it to run the next thing or if you want it to do a couple different things. It is wild. So payments, I think, is, we're here. MasterCard is partnered with, Ripple and many others to be able to facilitate AI payments on chain. There's still going to be a human in the loop and a checkpoint, which I think is absolutely paramount in the short term for sure, and maybe over the long term as well, because you need some governance and guidance around this stuff. You don't want it just going off and spending money and being willy-nilly and making its own decisions, because it will if you leave it unchecked. But it's hard to even start the conversation with somebody that they don't have the context around an agentic economy. It's literally 24/7, 365, no sleep, no weekends, never getting sick. And the efficiencies that these AIs are able to operate under, like there's stuff that would all the time. I do stuff every single day that would have taken me 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, like, and it does it in seconds, sometimes minutes, depending on, what you're trying to do. Like, it's creating code at the pace that would have, you can get a whole application built in 24 hours that would have taken you 3 to 5 months, 6 months ago, and a whole team of developers. It is absurd. And it's not slowing down. It's only progressing faster. You don't have to wait 9 months for another AI to be born. You don't have to wait 18 years for it to get into the workforce. It's literally, you can spin it up at any time. So the scale at which this is going to move, I don't think people can really comprehend. I don't think I even comprehend it. And for there to be a whole economy of agents paying agents and paying on behalf of humans to be able to do things, we're no longer constrained per capita. You could have an infinite number of agents in an agentic economy, all spending money. It's like the accelerant that's going to happen on the velocity of money with this, and then also the amount of money that's going to be moving and the market caps of things is going to be astronomical. It's going to unlock so much GDP growth. Again, I don't think I even begin to comprehend it. So if I can't comprehend all of it, and I live it, like I'm at these conferences, we talk about it every single day almost, we're using it in our business. If you're not even around it, to be able to even entertain the conversation would seem asinine, right? So I understand why people are positioned and they have the perception and perspective that they do. But it is going to be way bigger than any of us anticipate, and it's going to be huge for volumes of payments on blockchain. And again, the T54 investment by Ripple for agentic identity and tying that back to a beneficial owner, and also being able to audit all of that on a blockchain to make sure who did what and be able to track it. I think that they're doing a good job putting the guardrails in place. John, he says, "Hey Jake, I am selling my jet ski to buy some more XRP. How long before I could afford another one? My tea lady, Jenny, is not happy with me. She doesn't understand why. Please help her. She's watching. Cheers, Jenny." I would look at opportunity cost. Okay. So you get satisfaction in your life from that jet ski, obviously. Otherwise, you wouldn't be upset that you guys are letting it go in order to be able to purchase this internet money that seems like a frivolous purchase. Because you get benefit from the jet ski, right? So if you're selling the jet ski, you're probably going to get somewhere between $1,500 and $5,000. I don't know what it's going to be. XRP is $1. Okay, so we're just going to do some cost to benefit here. Even if XRP only gets back to all-time high, okay, so that's $3.84. You could then buy almost 4 jet skis for the one jet ski that you sold. So you could easily buy that one jet ski back. What's the time frame on that? I don't know. My best guess is in the short term here. When I say short term, I mean, potentially prior to the 28th of this month. And if that's the case, you're not out of jet ski very long. And again, I can't give you financial advice. You're going to have to talk to your hubby about this. Tell John. I'm not trying to convince him either way. He seems like he's already made his decision. He's asked me to explain cost to benefit on this, why, advocate for him in the decision. I would also say, and you could probably relate to this, you guys seem a little bit older, a little bit more established. It's just my guess based on you having a jet ski. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys are in your 20s and, I'm way off base here. But I'm sure that even if you're in your 20s, there have been periods in your life where you have foregone certain things in order to achieve a greater outcome. And I think that's what John's looking to accomplish here. He thinks that this is going to be a very short window of time where he's able to take advantage of something that then provides benefits for you and him for an extended period of time, far beyond when that jet ski would have, been useful. That's my guess. And I would tend to agree with him. But again, it's just like that. So I've talked about the house deal before. I think a lot of people will end up buying a home or upgrading their lifestyle post price appreciation. And you should do so. You've gone without, you've done things in order to be able to put yourself in a position. You deserve the fruits of your labor. Comma. A home is, a lot of boomers will tell you that it's an asset. It has appreciated in value. It has held its value, really. It hasn't really appreciated in value. It's held its value in comparison to the currency as it's been devalued over time. And it's really a depreciating asset. You can use cost seg in order to be able to write things off. There's literally like a tax code built around the depreciation of your house and it losing value over time. Same thing with the vehicle. I would also argue that it's a liability. Jet ski is for sure a liability. It is a hole in the water that you throw more money into, just like a boat. But if it provides you satisfaction and happiness, then it's hard to ascribe a monetary value to that, right? And if it gives you peace of mind, like owning your home does, and you have greater quality of life because you put yourself in that position, it might be worth the upside. It might not be worth, destabilizing that part of your life in order to gain something more. Anytime I have wanted to progress as a person, financially, in my business, almost anything, I have to be willing to give up what I currently have on the chance that I'm going to get something better. Most people get to good or great, and they're not willing to forego that for exceptional. And I get that. That's completely understandable. And maybe, you guys are in a well enough position, like you don't really need to sell the jet ski. Maybe John's already got a ton of XRP and he's just trying to top up the bag before things move here. I don't know. I don't know your financial position. I know nothing about it. So you need to have a conversation with him on how much you're going to be using that jet ski in the next 2-3 months. It is summertime. So maybe mama's going to be using that jet ski a lot, John. and she's missing out on valuable happiness because you're making this choice. But again, cost to benefit. Are you willing to forego things in the short term in order to get a greater outcome? That's for you guys to decide. You have to get a double jet ski or the long jet ski where you can ride multiple people to make it up for. Harley, 250 guy, F250 guy. You and my wife would get along. I was telling her, I was giving her crap about Ford earlier today. He says, Jake, if you have an XRP collateral loan with Arch, is there a way to fund your account at DWP before the loan is paid off? Or how does that work? I wasn't sure since DWP has a partnership with Arch. Yeah, so you can transition. If you are in the mastermind and you have utilized Arch, there is a way to transition your account from the mastermind side over to Digital Wealth Partners. I don't know that that's formalized yet. There hasn't been a whole lot of people that wanted to do it, but you absolutely can. I'm just like, again, I try to be, real with people. If you do that, you're going to have to pay AUM fees. And right now you're not having to pay AUM fees. So up to you on when you want to do that. But just be aware that actually, you know what? I don't think you pay AUM fees if your assets are over at Arch because it moves out of, yeah. I think you actually, no, I take that back. you're not going to have to pay AUM fees. If it's with them, you just roll it over there, and then you would be under their purview, and you could remove it and have an account there, DWP, on the other side of price appreciation. RBZ says, hello, sir. How are you, sir? I feel like I've heard that Evernorth buys XRP. It will be done directly on exchanges rather than OTC. Do you feel that that would impact the price and that Evernorth's, and that's on Evernorth? Thanks, Legend. Good question. Does Sailor buy on the exchanges? They're a DAT, or digital asset treasury company. Do you think he buys through the OTC desk, the dark pools, or the exchanges? The answer is the OTC desk and dark pools. However, the caveat would be, if there was not enough available on the OTC desk and dark pools, they would have to move to the exchanges. So, or maybe Evernorth just decides they're going to put a big splash in the pool, and they are going to do it on the exchanges in order to be able to drive the price up. I don't know. I'd see what takes place there. Oh, Kingdom Connected. Cool name. I think I said that last time. He says, Jake, bring the aliens as long as they use our XRP. Ooh, how tinfoil hat do you guys want to get? Everybody likes the tinfoil hat. I'll go down the road a little bit here. How deep do I want to go down? We'll talk about Greg Kidd, because you guys can go find this. This is a publicly available video. He was interviewed by DAI a long time ago. And in that video, Greg Kidd said that XRP, he viewed it as an intergalactic currency. You've also seen commercials that Ripple has put out with astronauts issuing payments from space. You've got Elon putting all those satellites up there. They're also going to be launching satellites from the moon into space. It's not so far-fetched to me that you would need to be able to send value between economies on different planets if you wanted to be an interstellar species, like Elon wants to do. So, yeah, I think it's quite feasible that we could see the aliens maybe supporting the XRP. And we could go way down the rabbit hole on that with Buzz Aldrin and a bunch of other things, but I'm not going to talk about that publicly. Hummingbird, he says, hey, Legend, how are you? Please explain at 101 dummy level. How will both XLM and XRP be used for the DTCC settlement? They will, right? 589, thank yous. They will. I actually made a whole video this last weekend about that exact topic. So I don't know where they're at in the editing process for that. But you know, I did a deep dive on it, and you will be able to, you know, watch that whole video when it comes out. That will explain that here in the near future. King Kapua, they say, tinfoil hat. Spielberg Disclosure Day comes out this Friday. The aliens. Here's the deal. So, would you guys agree that society is at one of the most divided points that it's ever been? There's the haves and have-nots. There's racism. There's all these things, these narratives that the media perpetrates through society that I don't think really have a whole lot of merit, to be honest with you. But you know, they take the outliers and they put them up there, and it drives engagement. The traditional media channels have lost a ton of viewership, so they need to incite some emotional things in order to be able to maintain viewership and continue to get the ad revenue that they currently live off of, basically. So they sensationalize a lot of things and portray society more divided than I think it actually is. But separate of that, if you did want to galvanize society, every time at the end of a fourth turning, if you haven't read The Fourth Turning, highly recommend reading that book. It's about socioeconomic cycles, and those tend to coincide with changes in currency globally. At least they have over the last 500 years. There's normally a great cataclysm at the end and during the fourth turning. It tends to be a war or conflict that ends up with some type of resolution. And on the other side of that, people are galvanized again. They're come together and then they work toward a new, better world. If they've pitted everybody against one another, every religion, every race, rich and poor, men and women, politically, everybody is diametrically opposed. What would be the way to resolve that without conflict? If you wanted the least amount of collateral damage, well, you would unite humanity against a common enemy, or you would galvanize them by saying, well, we're human and they're something else. I think that's where this is headed. I don't know how much of it is theatrical or real. I have no idea. A lot of people that talk about lizard people and the grays and all these other things that are out there. I don't know about all that. But if that was the perception in society, you would galvanize people. People would come together. They would be, willing to help another human. And so if this is, and I do think it is, another fourth turning, that's another great narrative to move to an intergalactic currency. That there's just a lot of things that go along with that tend to rhyme with how things are moving. So it makes sense to me that that would be the narrative that would come out that would unite people. Marty, thank you for the super chat, dude. 589. Very cool. He says, Jake the Great. What's up, my man? If you have a son that just graduated with a degree in astronomy and astrophysics and a minor in computational mathematics. Wow. And they are interested in space, but crypto too. What would be your advice? God bless you and your family. Wow. Congratulations to your son on the achievement of graduating college and having a dual degree with a minor in computational mathematics. He sounds extremely intelligent. Here's the deal that I went to college, went to school for finance. Just about 3 classes that I took that actually apply to what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I had to learn everything else after college. I had to speak with professionals that actually worked and did all of the things, and where they were like, yeah, throw all that stuff out. These are the small pieces that mattered, and this is how they translate to, what you actually have to do in this field. If he has interest in space and crypto, I go on the real, I would try to go get a job at SpaceX. My wife says it's too much tinfoil. I need to reel in the tinfoil hat. Tell her that you guys like the tinfoil hat. So I'm assuming your son's in his early 20s. I look at life through this framework. Patrick Bet-David is who I learned this from. Okay. He's been very successful. I've seen other people follow a similar framework that are also very successful. And so I'm going to give it to you, and hopefully it's valuable for your son. So for the first 20 years, so if you're going to live to be 100, we're going to call you 100 years old. First 20 years, don't mess up. Don't put yourself at a disadvantage. Don't put yourself behind the 8 ball. Do something that's going to give you, problems later in life. Felony, kid, drugs, all that stuff. From 20 to 40, you want to develop financial freedom so that you're still able to move and travel and be, young enough to enjoy the wealth. And the way that I've seen people be successful in doing that, sometimes they have a brilliant idea like Polymarket in their early 20s, and they have the technical expertise to be able to go execute on that. I think with AI agents and the internet, there's a lot of opportunity for people in their 20s to innovate and create new solutions in the market, solve their own problems, and create value for other people. If he's not as entrepreneurial, which if he did all these degrees and did well, most people that graduate summa cum laude or do very well in school tend to be very structured and organized, and they want something sustainable, and they're a bit more pragmatic than somebody that's an entrepreneur and is willing to take a little bit more risk. It's mostly like, people that didn't maybe perform as well in school. I was an A-B student. School was fairly easy for me. But I've always been literally, so just kind of back up, side tangent here. In my 20s and really late teens, got a lot of speeding tickets, like a lot of speeding tickets. And I actually had an insurance agency call me and try to recruit me. And they said that they had found a direct correlation between people that had a lot of traffic violations, speeding in particular, that were also good salesmen because they're willing to take risks and go a little bit faster than other people. Anyway, back on track here. If he is entrepreneurial, I would try to figure out a problem that he deeply understands based on the degrees that he's got, and go solve that problem for himself and do it in a big enough way where it's a BHAG, it's a giant, bodacious, crazy goal, and go after it. And you might wait till later. So that was kind of my plan, and it worked out for me. I did not have the business experience or the grit or determination or the discipline or a lot of the things that I developed in my 20s that I had in my 30s that have allowed me to execute on a lot of the stuff that we've done. And I needed to build those muscles. I needed to build those skills. I needed to learn those lessons before I would have been capable of, scaling a $1 organization, $1 billion organization, hiring the right talent, understanding systems and processes and payroll and cash flow and bill pay and HR and culture and all the other things that are required in order to be able to, manage 100 people or more. So for me, I needed to go work for somebody else. I needed to go see how the real world worked, get my teeth kicked in a bunch of times, learn how to sell stuff, learn how to relate to other people, learn psychology. A lot of the stuff that he's got in his degree here is very mathematically driven. Maybe he was like, in a fraternity and he's got a bunch of bros and he spent a bunch of time. I don't know. You didn't give me that piece. So I'm assuming he spent the majority of his time dedicated to his studies. EQ matters a lot in society. And so if he doesn't have that piece yet, I would encourage him to go out in the workforce and work for somebody else that he aspires to be like, or is really working on something innovative and huge, and like he can be an entrepreneur and really get behind whatever the vision or mission there is and learn a lot while he's doing it, get paid well to do it, and then figure out how he can. The only way that you're ever going to get really out of the rat race is, one, through investing in specific things, or taking equity in a company. And oftentimes that comes with additional risk. So, if he's young and he doesn't have a whole lot of responsibilities, that's probably a good time to take that additional risk. If you're a little bit older and you have children and a house and mortgage and all these other things that you got to pay for, it's a lot more difficult to roll the dice on stuff later on. So I don't know if that helps or not. There's a couple different ways you could take that. But again, the past 40, the other two pieces of Patrick Bet-David still, just to finish that framework, 40 to 60, you get to reinvent yourself. You get to do all the things that you didn't do when you were younger while you were building financial freedom. You're still healthy enough most of the time. You have access to the medical care and whatever else you need to be able to travel and do all the fun things. And then 60 until you pass away, it's really just about giving back. Like, what can you do to be a mentor or philanthropic stuff, or how can you give the value that you have or the wisdom that you have garnered back to society and help other people stand on your shoulders so they can go even further than what you did. There's the aliens again. Appreciate you guys becoming members of the YouTube channel. We did that one. We did that one. It always kicks me down in the chat here. Here we go. Eric Mr. D XRP. He says, since XRP wasn't meant for retail, do you think we could be held out in the future if we don't hold it in a trust or LLC? I'm not saying for sure. I think you have far less of a chance if it's held in a corporation or a trust. The reason being is if it's meant for institutions and enterprise, and you were holding it inside of an institution or enterprise or corporation, the government's not going to take it from you. And again, I'm not saying that to fearmonger anybody. I don't think you have to. I don't think that's going to happen. There's a lot of people that posture that. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it says the live is frozen for me. It's moving. So my phone is about to die, TikTok. So if I just drop off here, I'm sorry. So back to the question at hand. I don't think the government's going to confiscate your crypto. Again, like I pointed out earlier, somewhere between 10 and 15 of the total percentage of the supply of XRP is held by retail is my best guess at this point, based on all the conversations that I've had and what I can determine on chain. Most people are going to sell at $10, $50, $100. They're going to be out. They're not holding it over the long term. That's enough to change their life. I can tell you I talked to a gentleman yesterday that was very disappointed that he round tripped this cycle. A lot of money, like life-changing money that he round tripped on this cycle. He's very frustrated with, like many others are, with Ripple and how the ecosystem hasn't matured and implementation and utility of things, blah, 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 on and on. Him and I differ on, when and how that's going to take place. All good. Always like to listen to other people. But all that being said, $10 million, $20 million, $50 million changes most people's lives in a very meaningful way. And if that is your goal, you're not wrong in doing that, right? Like if your goal was, and you understand the tax implications, and you're going to have more than enough to be able to satisfy, your needs and your family's needs for whatever period of time you've predetermined, cool. I understand why people would sell. The people that have done the best in Bitcoin have continued to hold it. They've sold off some over time. One of the questions that Eric asked me on stage was, there's been a lot of whales that have divested here recently. And they have. There's a lot of Bitcoin OGs that have sold off a substantial amount of their position in this cycle. But I mean, if you got in at $1, $10, $100, $50, $1,000, $3,000, you've made a lot of money. And it's probably pertinent, or pertinent's not the right word, a good decision to de-risk some. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But my whole point with that is there will be less and less XRP that's held by retail over time. We want to help people structure it in the right way, mitigate the risk of creditors, provide them anonymity, give them the best ways to be able to offset the tax implications that they do try to sell some, or they're using it to produce income for themselves and their estate, and also be able to pass it on to the next generation as a capital asset that they hold on to. Why have the Rockefellers maintained their, empire, if you want to call it that, over multiple generations? They've used debt against their assets to buy more assets while maintaining exposure to the current assets that they had. And if they have assets where, technology changes and things shift, they pass those off. They try to sell them at the peak of those cycles, and they invest in things that are down or where they think the puck's going. But they do that through trust and life insurance policies and corporations. That's how the wealthy move their money. And we want people to be educated on that. A lot of people that are here are, blue collar. You've worked your whole life. You put yourself in a good position. This is something that you believe in, and you haven't ever had to deal with those things. I didn't come for money. I didn't understand this stuff, 5-6 years ago. I wish my dad had, and he would have been able to tell me these things. So that's part of it why I get on here and explain a lot of this stuff is I didn't have anybody to tell me this stuff. And I feel like it's important and it should be shared. U.S. Marine Corps, Mr. Luke, how are you, sir? He says price appreciation is a gone for conclusion. I agree. But when the DTC and Swift goes live, if price doesn't jump, is the theory dead? Thank you for what you do. P.S. Not too distant future. Not necessarily, but I'm confident that they are going to have to be able to use it in order to facilitate real-time settlement and payment. A lot of people thought that ISO was going to be the thing. ISO is a messaging standard that's been implemented. People are on board with that now. And so now they can go live with instant settlement. Again, I've said this in the past, but that's a precursor. It's not the thing that causes the adoption of XRP and instant settlement, but they have to have that in place in order to be able to proceed in that direction. And that's been in place now since November of last year. So, they've trialed that. They've made sure that there's throughput that works. And now that they can roll out the instant settlement piece of that, I think things are going to work out just fine. DFW Mike, my man, if you guys don't go to events in the mastermind, highly encourage you to take advantage of that. I know it's easy to be an introvert and kind of hang out in your own little ecosystem with your friends. But the whole point of the mastermind is to get good people together, that share the same, outlook and want to better one another and, create relationships before price appreciation so that you have cool people to go do cool stuff with. And shout out to DFW Mike. He puts on awesome events here in Dallas. He says, evening boss, your team worked like a well-oiled machine Saturday, answering questions for the crowd. I hope the attire was the correct size. Sophia signed up on DWP. Hello to the tea lady. Hope all is well and safe. Appreciate you, dude. I did get the polos. They are in my car right now. I have not tried them on, but they look like the right size for me. So I wish I could go grab it and share it. But he has a Texas chest piece on the polo, and it has the T and then the X is an XRP. So pretty cool. I really like that, and I will definitely be playing golf in those polos. We did this one. Real Michael Britt, he says, I'm at the point where I could use some direction, storage protection, only use Coinbase now. Where can I go? A little shy of 10K. We'll talk about that on Friday. That'll be one of the conversations that we have there in the webinar. We normally suggest, a portion go into a cold wallet. It's always good to have a couple of different places that you're holding your digital assets. We want to be an option for people at Digital Wealth Partners, and just so that you can have an Anchorage account over there in institutional custody that meets the 5-prong test that I, have for institutional custody. I think all institutional custody is not created equal, but I digress. So, if you have that much, a cold wallet's probably a good addition. Decent, full transparency. We're an affiliate for them. We get like $5 if you go through the link in the description on the YouTube and order through that. Please order direct from the manufacturers on a cold wallet. Do not order it off of Amazon or eBay. People do malicious things in order to be able to get the keys and take your stuff. So always order direct from the manufacturer. I like Decent because the biometric, the interface is easy to use, has a large breadth of assets that you can hold on there. Zaman, we don't have an affiliate relationship with them, but I think Weedsay's product's really good. Tangem is another good one. Arculus, LEPAL. Those are some air-gapped wallets. It's really your preference, right? How much do you want to spend on this piece of hardware and software in order to be able to hold your assets off of an exchange in case there's a situation? I will say Coinbase has done some squirrely things in the past. They're a publicly traded company now. So I don't know that that's going to be the case moving forward. They've done pretty well with airdrops and other stuff here recently. I don't know if Fred Recipoli's ever settled his case with them on the Songbird. I actually need to talk to Fred. His birthday's coming up. His birthday is the same as my birthday. So I need to reach out to him and see where that's at. But they did try to withhold the flare, and they finally got that back. And then they never did give anybody their Bitcoin Cash when that fork happened. So there's just been some things that Coinbase has done over time. They always go down when there's market volatility, inevitably execute their own trades and don't allow retail to trade. So just stuff like that, right? So you probably want to have a couple accounts across exchanges. Uphold's great. Kraken's great. OKX now doing 6% on ROUSD. If you move ROUSD onto their platform, and they're paying 3.5% on the ROUSD. Shout out to OKX for supporting the XRP army and Ripple. So a lot of good exchanges out there that I don't think are going to go anywhere. They don't segregate custody from the exchange, though. So there is the chance that if there is a liquidity crisis or an issue and they go bankrupt, you are a creditor, right? And so that's why you do want to hold some, either an institutional custody with us, where it is your account, your crypto FBO account over there at Anchorage, or, you know, in a cold wallet, where it's segregated, bankruptcy remote. Well, cold wallet's not bankruptcy remote, but it is segregated. So anyway, that's my suggestion. Any of those cold wallets I mentioned are great. Kingdom Connected. He says, thank you for all that you do. What are your top picks for passive income? Would you use dividend ETFs, even high risk ETDs like BTCC? Good life. Hashtag good life. My phone's going to die. I'm sorry, TikTok. If I just drop out of the abyss, it's not because I don't love you. It is because my phone died. So, passive income. There's no such thing as completely passive income. You're going to have to be paying somebody to monitor stuff, or you're going to have to be monitoring it yourself. If you own real estate directly, you're definitely going to be working in order to be able to maintain the properties and keep them rented and a bunch of other things. On real estate, you know, I don't have that book. Yeah. Oh. If you haven't read this, I would suggest you read it. I have a lot of respect for Grant Cardone. I don't know that I would do business with him, but I have a lot of respect for him. This is a really good book on real estate. And he talks about multifamily properties and how they do due diligence on it and how they look at different properties and which ones they make acquisitions on and invest in. And he breaks down all the vocabulary associated with it. You want to educate yourself a lot before you go into that lane. The one real estate deal that I ever tried to participate on, I put up the hard money and lost the hard money. Not so great. It's like 300 grand. So just be aware of the risks. Make sure you're partnering with good people and you're educated before you take that leap. Oftentimes, a lot of people, I think a REIT would be good exposure for people if you did want an allocation to real estate with a dividend. I can't really tell you what to do. Again, I don't understand, you know, where you're at financially or your domain of expertise. You'd probably want to talk with a certified financial planner. Tom Teal is our head CFP over at Digital Wealth Partners. Highly recommend anybody that's looking for cash flow or, you know, passive income, ways to create passive income. You go talk to Tom on our team, put together a full financial plan for you and model things out, which is great. Annuities, you know, annuities are a great way to do it. Staking your crypto, participating in some of the yield products that we're going to be bringing to market. All those will be very passive. Dividend paying stocks, like you mentioned, are a great way. Those aren't guaranteed dividends though. So just be aware of the risk associated with that. If you're dependent on that cash flow, you want to, you know, have some way to be able to diversify that or mitigate the risk. You might sell calls and puts around your digital assets, similar to if you had a large stock position, to be able to generate premium off those positions. There's tons of different avenues that you can proceed down depending on what assets you have, your domain of expertise, and your cash flow needs. There's a podcast that I listened to that the CIO of DuPont's family office was on. Their family is 7th or 8th generation at this point. I think he's 6th or 7th generation, the CIO that manages that. He went to a lot of endowments and looked at their strategies to generate cash flow on a consistent basis. The family is used to living off of the dividends from GM and DuPont stock. And so they no longer have either one of those positions. They've de-risked from those and sold those off over the years. And now they have, but they've modeled their portfolio very similar to an endowment on how the cash flow is structured and their venture arm as well. So I would do some research on ChatGPT or these other LLMs. Again, don't take financial advice from an AI. Speak with a financial advisor, but it can give you some topics of discussion so that when you bring that to the financial advisor, you have some background and context for the conversation. And you might bring up some new ideas that they hadn't considered. CGI investor, they say, hello, Jake, Beyond Broke Mastermind, Carbon One. Awesome, dude. Glad to see you. I just wanted to say thank you for all that you do, for all the sacrifices you and your family have made. Your mastermind is one of the best I have ever been a part of. Thank you, man. The ROI that you provide is 1,000-fold. Thank you. That is the highest compliment that I've gotten in a while. So thank you very much for that. That's, again, I talked about having aspirations earlier. I've been a part of a lot of masterminds, and the founder or the person that's involved with it or started it, they kind of step away and they're not overly involved. I'm in there twice a week, every week, minimum, most of the time 3 to 4 times a week, every week. I want to make sure that people are getting tons of value, way more than they're paying for. And, there's a significant return. There's an ROI on your time and investment, because it's not just your money. You do have to put the time in order to get the benefit for it. And the connections, access to deal flow, the continuing education that we provide, the courses that we're rolling out. We're also going to be able to provide some really cool member services in the not too distant future. I got a meeting about that tomorrow. So we want to continue to, compound the value that's in that group. And I really do appreciate you being in there. More in real life events than any other community in crypto, so that maybe Crypto Mondays. Shout out to Lou. But if you want to go check it out, we would love to have you in there. And you can experience for yourself the culture that we have, which again, just surreal to me that it's been able to be maintained at such a large scale. So it is beyondbroke.com. You can use the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for $2. Here it is. This is the one I was waiting on. We'll probably end it on this one tonight. I'm sure I missed some super chats, so I apologize. Email them to us, info@digitalfamilyoffice.io, and they'll make it way over to my wife, and she will print them out, put them on my desk here. And we'll answer them Monday. Why did R3 come out and say that they're only using Sol? Did you see the CTO from R3 paper? He wrote only talking about Sol. This is another one of those companies I have an NDA with. How do I want to say this? Same way that I talked about Monday. You need redundancies. You need multiple networks to be able to settle transactions if something becomes congested or there's overflow. Hedera is interoperable with Corda. There's some other networks that are interoperable with Corda, like XDC and the XRPL. XRP is still the primary settlement mechanism if there's enough liquidity in the token. So obviously, they want to come out and promote Solana. I don't want to say that because that's going to get me in trouble. Seems to be a strong partnership there. There's often other economics in strong partnerships. I don't know what those are. I don't care to speculate on it. But you kind of have to ask yourself, why would they be so prominently promoting Solana when they can use these other avenues to settle transactions between, use the Corda settler to settle those transactions in other cryptocurrencies? So we'll have to see. Like, I'll say it this way. Results will speak for themselves on the other side of it. All right. I got three more here. I got three more, and then we are going to wrap it up. XX Jupiter, they say, what do you think Japan and Canada's economies will look like long term? Super bullish on Japan. Super bullish on Japan. Canada, I think, I've told you guys this before. I think we're moving toward a technocracy. I don't know how long it's going to take to get there. It could be 2 years. It could be 10 years. I don't know how long it's going to take. But I think that Canada, the US, Mexico, Central America, Greenland will all end up rolling into one giant economy. And in that case, Canada gets lumped in with the US, and they're going to do fantastic also. So we'll have to see. Again, I know that sounds crazy. It's a long time horizon. Zoom out with me. But you asked for long term. So that's what I'm giving you. The House Junkie, he says, hey, Jake, how are you, sir? Is Trump the one deciding when the reverse carry trade will happen? If yes, will he allow it to happen even with midterms coming up? So I actually had this conversation yesterday with some very prominent people. Nobody knows is the answer. I talked to some people. I don't want to say that. Somebody that's close to Trump, and he still doesn't know. He even speculated that it might take longer. Most people think it's going to take longer because they want the market to stay good up through midterms in order to be able to make sure that they keep ownership of the House. I think if they went ahead and let it roll now in June, they have a lot of time to be able to recover the market and get into a good position and expand the economy and show what these new technologies can do in the next 5 months before midterms. If they get closer to midterms and it wobbles and things fall apart right before midterms, they don't have enough time to be able to recover and do well in that election. So it's one or the other. I think that they need to roll it in the next 20 days, 18 days, or it'll end up getting pushed out past midterms. I tend to think next 18 days makes a lot more sense personally. And I just want to circle back on this. Is Trump the one deciding? Trump is not the one deciding. Zach, me and Hold, he says, congrats on 200K. I'm new here. I put in 10K into XRP, XLM, and Solana, waiting for the bull run. God bless. Jesus is king. Love it, dude. Yeah, I think you showed up at the right time. It's like me in 2020. I don't know what I'm doing. Listen, people that are smarter than me, throw some money at it. Hope it works out. And I think it will for you. We'll take one more and then we're going to wrap it. Michael, my man, he says, Big Jake, can you please get a little more specific on the religious aspect of not investing in XLM? I cannot. Nope. I sure can't. If you want to know more, go join the mastermind. Rockin', he says, if Japan's meeting is Monday, that means the OCC has to give regs around stablecoin in the next 4 days. Not necessarily. They could wait until there is a catalyst that requires them to progress quickly and then issue stablecoin guidance in that circumstance. But they got to do it by the 18th. So anytime between now and then, I would expect that to transpire. This person's asked, sorry, I keep running through more because I got a little bit more time. Are you going to continue to make YouTube videos after price appreciation? I sure will. They will be on a lot of different topics. I want to continue to progress. I talk about a lot of different things. I like progressive technologies, different types of investments, different ways to structure investments or loans, or just educate people on finance. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing, stuff that I'm working through, our company's rolling out, we want to create really innovative, cool financial products that are kind of first of their kind or super progressive. And so that allows me to be in really cool rooms and have conversations. And I try to share a lot of that wisdom and some of those insights with you guys, and I'll continue to do that. And last one for the night. Is 2,000 XRP enough? Enough for what? So I'm going to circle back to Hampton's Tech Week. I'll get to your question. I will answer the question. And it's just going to be a high-level opinion. The first talk that they had at Hampton's Tech Week came from a billionaire. He's in the exit business. He only allocates capital to companies that are going to have a significant exit. He's been very successful in doing that and also providing strategic expertise in order to be able to help them grow and have that exit. He's obviously focused on AI. Everybody's focused on AI. So his talk was about that. But before he got into that with the other gentleman that he brought on stage, he was like, I want to give you guys some tangible like takeaways. And what he said were things that you already know, right? But like you got to apply them. And in an AI world, when you talk to an LLM or really anybody, the better question that you ask, the better answer you're going to get. So the more details you can provide an AI or an individual when you are asking a question, the better answer you're going to receive. If it's a very visceral question, surface level, it doesn't have a whole lot of thought, it's opaque or open, that's the type of answer you're going to receive, both from an AI and from me. If you can drill down and give me really specific stuff, like the gentleman talking about his son and his degrees and, advice for that, I just really needed more advice than what he gave me. There's a lot of context that I'm missing. I just did the best I could with what I had. But to ask somebody, is 2,000 XRP enough, is like, there's no context around that. It's not a qualifier. I have no idea where you're positioned, how you're positioned, your long-term goals, your age, your risk tolerance, your time horizon. Like I can't answer it in any meaningful way that would provide you any value. So I would encourage people that the feedback that I would give you on the question is probably not what you're looking for. It is to ask better questions, not just on the super chats and lives here, but in your life with other people. And also if you are speaking to an LLM or an AI agent, give it as much detail as you possibly can and give it context and ask very pointed questions and dig deep. Continue to ask questions until you get to the crux of whatever you really want to know. And you're going to be a lot more successful in just life in general. So with that, I am going to end it. If you do need an LLC, we talked about that a little bit. You know what? Just join the webinar. On Friday this week, we're hosting a webinar. If you got at least 10,000 XRP, even if you're just close to the 10,000 XRP, go sign up for the webinar. You're going to get the recording afterward. We're going to talk about LLCs. We're going to talk about trusts. We're going to talk about life insurance. We're going to talk about financial products, diversification, alternative investments, tons and tons and tons of things over there. And again, none of it is financial advice. It's just from my own experiences and things. If you want to go ahead and set up the LLC now, you can go to app.digitalascensiongroup.com and fill the thing out. Go from there. If you need trusts or taxes or higher level estate planning, that's over there at digitalfamilyoffice.io. If you need the wealth management side of things and you want to be able to partner with us and hold your assets at Anchorage and get access to all the products and solutions we're bringing to market, it is digitalwealthpartners.net. You just go to the contact us form over there. And then last but not least, obviously, if you want to just learn more about this stuff, you want to stay on top of things, you want kind of a consolidated, news feed and a good community to be a part of, and access to a bunch of other fantastic things, financial education, business resources, private deals, go check out the mastermind. It's beyondbroke.com. And yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Again, appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday, asking great questions. I hope you'll have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the next one.